The wind howled like a grieving beast across the frozen plains of northern Siberia, clawing at the mountainside station where Elias Ward lived alone. The research outpost, once a beacon for geologic surveys and climate studies, now stood half abandoned. Mostly forgotten just Elias, his data logs, and the long, bitter cold. That night, a blizzard darker than any before swallowed the world outside, turning the sky into a swirling chaos of white noise. The radio was dead, the power flickered, in nervous pulses like the heartbeat of a dying star. Elias stood by the reinforced window, sipping black coffee, his breath curling up in ghostly plumes. He was used to silence, to isolation, to winter dragging on like an old wound. But what he saw next didn't belong in any storm or on this. Planet dot something was moving out there dot. He squinted through the frost-covered glass, frowning. A shadow, small and stumbling, barely a silhouette against the snow. It looked like a child, but that was impossible. Nobody should be out here. The closest village was over 200 kilometers away. Heart racing, Elias pulled on his thermal gear, grabbed a flare, and pushed out into the roaring blizzard. The wind bit into him like knives. Every step forward was a war. But he kept going, eyes locked on the dark shape crumpled against a snowbank. When he reached it, he stopped in disbelief. The thing now, the boy, if you could call him that, was huddled in a fetal position, shaking violently. His skin shimmered faintly, like ice under moonlight, with veins glowing a soft blue. He wasn't human, and yet, he was crying dot, not a human. Cry. It was softer, like a wind chime choked with sorrow. But Elias understood instantly. He dropped to his knees beside the creature, pressing his glove to the tiny chest, alive but barely. The child flinched at his touch, one large eye fluttering. Open, elliptical, and liquid black. For a second, Elias hesitated. Then he saw something familiar in that terrified gaze. Pain, cold, helplessness. Elias didn't ask questions. He scooped the boy up, shielding him with his body as they fought their way back through the storm. Snow clung to them like leeches. But Elias moved like a machine, pushing past exhaustion, his legs trembling from exertion. By the time he collapsed inside the station, the child was barely breathing. Elias dragged him to the emergency cot, stripped off the frost-encrusted clothes, and wrapped him in thermal blankets. He stared down at the being, stunned. The child's skin was too smooth, hairless, and oddly translucent. Fingers, 5 of them, ended in soft claws. A faint pulse of light pulsed beneath the skin, as if his blood carried fireflies. Elias turned on the heater, filled a thermos with warm water, and gently held it to the child's lips. The boy sipped, flinching. Then, after a moment, his trembling slowed. His eyes searched Elias's face, half terror, half confusion, and beneath that, trust. Elias knelt beside him and whispered, "You're safe now, kid. I've got you." The child didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. The storm raged outside like an ancient fury, but inside, under yellow lights and the soft whir of heaters, something warmer had taken root. Elias didn't sleep that night. He watched over the child, checking his vitals, running his mind in frantic loops. What the hell was this being? Where had he come from? Was he alone? Was someone looking for him or hunting him? But the bigger question wasn't who the boy was dot, it was what Elias was willing to risk now that he'd found him. Asterisk Elias hadn't been close to a child in over a decade. He had no children of his own, no siblings with kids, no real relationships that lasted past the first crack in his emotional armor. His life was work, weather, and the quiet sadness of a man who once dreamed of stars but settled for studying the ice beneath his boots. But that morning, if you could call it morning in the endless winter night, something had changed in him. He stood over the alien boy, now sleeping fitfully under layers of wool and synthetic heat, and felt a strange, ancient instinct awaken. Protection. Not curiosity, not science. Something simpler, older. The need to keep this child alive. He moved quietly through the station, checking supplies. Rations were low, but he could stretch them. The outpost had power for another few weeks if he didn't overuse the heater. The comms were still dead satellite interference from the storm, most likely. He tried twice, then gave up. Whoever this child was, there would be no calling for help. Not yet. He returned to the cot and found the boy sitting upright, staring. Wide-eyed at the room, muscles tensed as if expecting pain. Elias knelt slowly, like approaching a wild animal. "You're okay," he said gently. "You're safe." The boy flinched at his voice. He pressed himself against the cot's wall, watching Elias with alien eyes full of confusion. He looked like a porcelain doll made of light and frost, and Elias could see the outline of bones beneath the skin, strange, flexible structures unlike anything human. But it was the eyes that held him. They were too expressive, too knowing. The boy tilted his head, mimicking Elias's motion. He seemed curious, cautious. Elias slowly reached into his pocket and pulled out a protein bar. He unwrapped it and took a bite, exaggerated the motion, then held it out. The boy looked at it, then at Elias, then tentatively reached out with a hand that shimmered like oil in moonlight. He sniffed the bar, licked it once, grimaced, but took a small bite, chewed, swallowed, and then he coughed a wet, pitiful sound and curled up, shivering again. Elias instinctively leaned closer, wrapping another blanket around him. His hand rested gently on the boy's shoulder, and the alien stiffened, but then, slowly, he relaxed into the warmth. A sound escaped his lips, something between a sigh and a low whistle. Elias didn't know what it meant, but it didn't sound afraid. Hours passed like snowfall, soft, slow, and quiet. The boy slept on and off, his breathing erratic, his body still adjusting. Elias used the time to observe, to try to understand. The child's physiology was remarkable internal luminescence, rapid cellular repair, an energy signature unlike anything on Earth, but Elias didn't write it down. He didn't photograph it. He didn't catalog or dissect. He cared. That surprised him most of all. This wasn't a specimen. It was someone's child. By evening, the storm outside grew even more violent. The wind shrieked like a banshee, rattling the outpost windows and threatening to strip the roof off. The lights flickered again. Elias powered down unnecessary systems to conserve energy. When he returned to the boy, he found him awake again, sitting up. Their eyes met, and then something strange happened. The boy reached out a hand. It trembled, but it hovered there, halfway between offer and request. Elias hesitated only a moment before taking it. Their fingers touched, and a shock ran through Elias, not pain, but feeling. An echo of emotion poured into him, like music in a forgotten language. Loneliness, cold, hunger, fear, and beneath it all, a single aching word not spoken in sound but in soul. Help. Elias gasped and pulled back, stunned. The boy recoiled too, whimpering, afraid he had done something wrong. But Elias held up both hands, calming him. "It's okay," he said, voice shaking. "You're not alone anymore?" For the first time, the boy responded with a noise that resembled a human one, a tiny, sharp exhale. Not laughter, not quite, but close. And in that moment, Elias knew this wasn't a rescue. It was a beginning. He looked toward the frozen door, toward the storm that showed no signs of ending, and thought of what might be out there. A crash site, a search party, or something darker. Whatever this child had run from, it wasn't finished. And now Elias was a part of it. He didn't know what he would do next. He only knew he would not let this boy be taken. Not by the cold, not by fear, not by whatever had left him to die on the ice. "Rest," he whispered, placing another heap. "Pack under the blanket. I'll keep watch." And so the night passed, the storm screaming its fury, while one man guarded a life that didn't belong to his world, but had somehow become part of his heart. Days passed like slow-moving glaciers, thick and silent, but each one melted something in both Elias and the child. The storm outside had finally eased, leaving behind a shattered world of ice and silence. Sunlight, pale and cold, filtered through the reinforced windows but offered no warmth. Inside, though, the atmosphere had changed. The boy Elias had started calling him Soul. A name that felt right somehow had stopped flinching every time Elias entered the room. He no longer curled into himself at night, and his breathing had grown steadier, stronger. Still, he hadn't spoken a word. Not with his mouth. But there were other ways to speak. Soul watched Elias constantly, with those large dark eyes that caught light and held it. He mimicked his movements, his expressions. When Elias chuckled softly at some broken memory while sipping coffee, Soul tilted his head and pressed his fingers to his lips, trying to understand the sound. When Elias wrapped a scarf around his neck before stepping into the cold, Soul tugged at the corner of his own blanket like he was dressing himself too. These small acts, so subtle they might have gone unnoticed, were what bound them. A quiet echo of affection, of learning, of becoming. One evening, as the world outside dimmed into the endless gray-blue twilight of polar winter, Elias found himself pulling out the old radio again. Still no signal. Static whispered back at him like a restless ghost. He sighed, rubbed his eyes, and turned to find Soul watching from the cot, his head tilted in silent question. Elias set the radio down and sat cross-legged on the floor. "You're wondering what that is, huh?" he said. "That's how I used to talk to the world, when the world still cared to listen." Soul blinked slowly, then climbed off the cot, careful and curious, like a fawn learning its legs. He padded over and sat beside Elias, mirroring his posture. It was such a simple thing, that closeness, but it made Ez's chest tighten. He stared at the boy for a long moment, then looked down at his own hands, scarred, weathered, calloused. From years of cold and solitude. "You remind me of someone," Elias murmured. "My brother had a kid. Ethan, sweet boy. Died young. Cancer." He swallowed hard. The name still hurt. I remember the way he looked at me the last time I saw him. Like I could make the world better just by being there. But I couldn't. I left for this place a month later. Sol reached out and, for the first time without hesitation, touched Elias's hand. It wasn't just contact. It was a connection. A pulse moved through him, a warm vibration under the skin. And suddenly images, not pictures, not quite memories, flashed. In Elias's mind, a round vessel streaking across stars. Screams, flashes of light, a broken atmosphere, fire and ice. Sol, smaller and wrapped in something like arms, then falling, spinning, alone. Elias gasped, tears suddenly stinging his eyes. The link broke, but the emotions remained raw, powerful, impossible to describe. Sol hadn't meant to show it all, Elias realized. It wasn't a message. It was a wound that had opened just by touching kindness. "You lost them," Elias whispered. "Your family." Sol looked away, silent but trembling. His eyes glistened, not with tears, not exactly, but with something like them. Elias reached out slowly and pulled the boy into a careful embrace. Sol stiffened, then sank into him, clutching the thick folds of Elias's jacket as though afraid he might vanish. "I'm here," Elias said hoarsely. "I don't know why. You're here, or what brought you to me, but I won't leave you." That night, Elias found himself reading aloud to Sol from an old paperback novel, the corners frayed and yellowed with time. He didn't know if Sol understood the words, but the boy seemed to like the rhythm, the rise and fall of Elias's voice. He lay curled near the heater, watching the flicker of the emergency lamp as if it held stories of its own, and then, just before sleep claimed them both, Sol made a sound. It was small, soft, a breath-shaped whisper like wind moving through glass. As Elias sat bolt upright, heart pounding. Sol's lips had formed the name with exquisite care, the syllables falling from him like fragile leaves. Elias laughed, really laughed for the first time in years, tears streaking his cheeks. "You little bastard," he whispered joyfully. "You can learn?" Sol smiled, just slightly, and that smile was more powerful than any language. It was the kind of smile that could shatter walls built by grief and time. A smile that said, "I see you. I feel you. You are not alone." And in that moment, under the dying hum of machinery and the heavy hush of a frozen world, Elias no longer felt like a man wasting away at the edge of nowhere. He felt like a father. Or maybe just a human finally doing something that mattered. Because love, real love, doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it simply endures. And sometimes it saves a life that doesn't even speak your language. It began with the lights in the sky. They came without warning. Without sound, vast ribbons of emerald and violet and gold swirling across the heavens like the breath of some cosmic god. Elias had seen auroras before, sure, but not like this. These weren't atmospheric anomalies. They danced with purpose. They watched. And from the moment they appeared, Sol changed. He woke in the middle of the night, gasping, convulsing in his blanket nest like he was underwater. His eyes flared with wild light, brighter than before, the glow from beneath his skin pulsing in feverish rhythm. Elias rushed to his side, cradling him, murmuring comforts that felt useless in the face of whatever was happening inside that alien body. Sol's hand shot up and gripped Elias's shoulder, not to push him away, but to anchor himself. Elias felt it again, the connection. Stronger this time, deeper. A current of sensation blasted into his brain like a breaking dam. He saw a world made of glass and wind, a planet far from Earth, beautiful and fragile. He saw Sol's people, tall and luminous, moving in grace and song, in harmony with the elements. He saw machines, vast and black, cutting the sky, fire-swallowing oceans. Screams not made of words, but vibrations that split mountains. And he saw Sol, held tight by his mother, her glow flickering as their craft fled the death of their world. Their ship, not a warship, not an invasion, a life pod, a desperate escape. Sol had been shot down, not by the storm, not by chance. By humans. Elias staggered back as the vision faded, heart hammering, bile rising in his throat. "No," he breathed. That can't be us. That can't be us." But Soul just looked at him with those eyes, no judgment, no blame, just pain. Deep, endless pain. In the following hours, Elias barely spoke. He moved through the outpost like a ghost, tending to Soul in silence, his mind spinning. The auroras still shimmered above. The radio had started picking up strange signals, pulses, not voices. Rhythmic, deliberate, like sonar across the stars. Someone or something was coming. It was then that Elias did something he hadn't done in over 10 years. He opened the encrypted satellite feed meant for emergency diplomatic alerts. Buried beneath layers of Cold War code and modern paranoia was a hidden log. One new file, uploaded 2 days before the storm hit. He played it. What he heard made him drop the mug in his hand. Unidentified object entered Earth's upper atmosphere at 0400 UTC. Presumed hostile. Authorization given for immediate interception. Debris located in Siberian quadrant. No life forms detected. Recovery team en route. Elias stared at the screen. No life forms detected. They didn't even check. They saw something strange, assumed threat, and fired. The child in his care, this broken, beautiful child, had been shot down like a dog. His stomach turned. He looked back at Soul, who was now awake, standing near the window, bathed in the strange light from the sky. There was no accusation in his eyes, only quiet sorrow. Elias whispered, "They're coming for you." Soul didn't nod. He didn't need to. Elias walked over, knelt beside him. "Is it your people or mine?" Soul placed a small, luminous hand over Elias's heart and closed his eyes, and Elias felt it, a massive ship, moving like a moon across space. Not human, searching, desperate, but not alone. Other signals military, satellites repositioning, coordinates narrowing. Whoever got here first would decide Saul's fate. Elias stood, a fire igniting in his chest. Then we don't wait, we run. Soul looked at him, confused. "You hear me, kid?" Elias said, more steel in his voice now than he'd felt in years. "They didn't care. If you were a threat, they saw you and pulled the trigger. And now, either your people find you first or mine do. And I'm not risking that." Saul's head tilted. "I am getting you out of here," Elias said. "I don't know how far we'll make it, but I'll take you as far as I can." Soul touched his hand again. A warmth surged through Elias. Not fear this time. Hope. And then, for the first time, Soul spoke clearly, not telepathically. Not with broken mimicry. "You stay." Elias blinked. "What?" Soul placed a hand over Elias's chest, then his own. "You home, me stay." Elias's throat caught. "You think this place is home? You think I'm—" Soul nodded slowly. A tear, not water, but glowing fluid slid down his cheek. "You don't belong here, Soul," Elias said, voice cracking. "You can't belong here. We're not ready. You'd never be safe." Soul whispered, "You are." And in those 2 words, Elias heard everything. Trust, bond, a child who had lost a family and found a human stranger willing to die for him. Elias realized then that it didn't matter what the world thought. It didn't matter who came next. He had already chosen his side, and it was this boy, this strange, alien child who had more humanity in his silence than Elias had seen in half the governments on Earth. The radio crackled again. "Arrival estimated in 19 hours. Secure the perimeter. Eliminate if necessary." Elias turned off the feed, heart pounding. The truth was out, and the race had begun. Asterisk, the sky was no longer empty. By the second day after the auroras came, Elias spotted the dots tiny at first, flickering against the gray-blue expanse like distant stars that had lost their place. Satellites or ships, he couldn't be sure. But they were moving, deliberate, coordinated, and getting closer. He knew this place well enough to recognize the silence of air too still. The predators were circling. The war for one lost child had already begun. Inside the outpost, Elias packed what little they could carry. His hands moved quickly, but his mind churned slower, each thought heavy as stone. He had spent his whole life hiding from people, from pain, from the echoes of a past filled with regrets too stubborn to die. Now he was doing the one thing he thought he'd never do again. Caring, risking everything, and it scared the hell out of him. Soul watched him from across the room. He had grown stronger, the limp had faded, his eyes had brightened. But there was a new tightness in his face, an understanding now that went beyond mimicry. He knew the danger was close, and still he said nothing. Because what could a child say to a man who had decided to stand against the world for him? They planned to leave at dusk. Elias had mapped a route south by snowbike, across the frozen plateau, then into the caves that laced the mountain ridge like scars. There was an old communications hub buried under the rock, long abandoned but still reachable. If he could power it, maybe he could reach someone beyond the global blackouts. Maybe he could send a signal Sol's people would understand. Or maybe he'd just buy them time, but when he stepped outside to test the snowbike, his breath froze not from the cold, but from the sight across the white horizon. A black shape, no lights, no noise, just stillness and menace. It wasn't military, not human, sleek, curved, predatory in design. The ship hovered above the ground, half-cloaked in atmospheric shimmer. No weapons fired, no soldiers emerged. Just a presence. Sol stepped beside him and stared. "You know them?" "Elias," whispered Dot. Sol said nothing. His hand found Elias's and squeezed Dot, and then came the twist Dot behind them on the ridge. Another shape descended. This one was human. Elias recognized the insignia even from this distance. The blue and silver eagle of the Global Defense Coalition. A dropship. Small, fast, deadly. It landed hard, kicking up snow like ash. 5 figures disembarked, clad in black armor, their visors opaque, rifles sleek and silent, tactical, efficient. Elias backed up slowly, dragging Sol behind him. But it was too late. Dr. Elias Ward, came a voice from a speaker hidden in one of the soldiers' helmets. "Step away from the subject." Elias didn't answer. He glanced between the 2 ships. One alien, silent and still. The other human, loud in its threat. His heart thundered. "I said step away," the soldier repeated, his rifle rising. "He's not your responsibility." Elias's voice shook with fury. "He's a child. He's a hazard. We don't even know what he's capable of. Orders are to retrieve or neutralize." "Your interference is noted." Elias stood straighter. "You shot him down. You didn't even try to communicate. You just assumed." He fell from the sky in a military corridor. The voice snapped. "We don't assume, we act." Sol tugged at Elias's sleeve, his eyes wide with fear. Behind them, the alien ship still hadn't moved, still hadn't defended him. And then Elias understood. "They're watching," he said aloud. "They want to see what we do." He looked at Sol. The boy's face was drawn, trembling, not from the cold, but from heartbreak. Because even now, he hoped humans could do the right thing. Elias stepped in front of him. "You want him," he said, voice calm and deadly. "You go through me." One of the soldiers stepped forward. "You are obstructing an international directive. Final warning." "I don't care," Elias said, steel in his eyes. "I've buried too many innocent souls already. I won't let you add one more." The soldier raised his weapon. Sol stepped forward. And that was the moment. Not with force. Not with a blast of alien energy, just one step. One tear sliding down his glowing cheek. He held out his hands empty, trembling, small. A universal gesture of peace. And Elias saw it, mirrored for a second in the visor of the soldier ahead. Hesitation. A flicker of doubt, but doubt wasn't enough. The shot rang out, and Elias moved without thinking. He threw himself in front of Sol, felt the impact like a sledgehammer to the chest, and hit the ground hard. Pain exploded in his ribs, in his lungs, his body screaming as snow soaked through his coat. Sol dropped beside him, hands pressed to the wound, his eyes wild with terror. "No," Elias coughed. "No, kid. You gotta run." But Sol didn't run. He screamed. Not a sound of fear, a sound of sorrow so loud, so resonant that the snow around them began to tremble. Light surged from his body, white and brilliant and pure. The alien ship responded instantly. Its hull shimmered, powered up. The humans backed away, weapons rising, but did not fire again. Not after that scream. Not after that light. Elias, bleeding, fading, reached up. "Don't lose who you are," he whispered. "Even when they forget, you matter." And then darkness, but not the end. Because in the silence after the scream, something ancient had awakened. Not just technology. But judgment. Asterisk, the light didn't vanish. It swelled. It radiated from Sol like a sun made of memory. Its beams catching on the ice, the soldiers, the ship, the very air itself turning everything sharp and still. The snow stopped falling. Time seemed to hold its breath. Elias lay crumpled in the snow, blood spreading beneath him in a wide scarlet bloom. His chest rose and fell in stutters, and for a moment, it looked as if death had already taken him. But Sol was still on his knees beside him, hands pressed against the wound, eyes glowing so fiercely they burned through the STORMLIGHT. And in that moment, the alien ship moved, not forward, not to attack. It rose silently into the air, hovering, Above them, like a sentinel, panels on its underside shifted and turned, revealing a radiant sphere pulsing in harmony with Saul's light. It wasn't a weapon, it was a mirror. A reflection of the child's grief, it bore witness. And it remembered, the soldiers didn't know what to do. The leader barked orders, but the words faded into static as the snow itself began to hum. One of the soldiers lowered his rifle. Another took a step back. The light was showing them something, images bleeding into their minds, not as threats but as truths, visions of Saul's world. The destruction, the kindness Elias had shown, the loneliness, the love, all of it compressed into pure, wordless empathy. But the captain stood firm. He raised his weapon again and stepped towards Saul, voice shaking but resolute. We don't know what this thing is capable of. This is too much power for one life. Stand aside. Saul rose, standing between Elias and the rifle. His hands were open, empty. He made no sound this time. He simply looked into the face of the man who would kill him and waited. Not in fear, not in rage, but in faith that anyone might choose better. The rifle's safety clicked off, and then Elias moved. He didn't stand. He didn't cry out. He didn't reach for a weapon. He had none. But he reached out with a shaking, bloodied arm and grasped the hem of the captain's coat. The soldier looked down, startled, just long enough for Elias to speak, voice rough. As gravel, you want to be remembered for this? He rasped. For killing a child begging for mercy? This isn't just alien tech. This isn't about risk. It's about who the hell we are. The captain stared at him. His finger trembled. On the trigger. You kill him, Elias wheezed, and everything weird dies with him. Something broke in that soldier's eyes. Maybe it was doubt. Maybe it was shame. Or maybe it was the ghost of a child he'd once held in his arms, or a memory of someone he'd tried to protect. Slowly, achingly slowly, he lowered the weapon. Medical. Evac, he muttered into his cum. Send it now. The others didn't speak. They stepped back, forming a loose perimeter, no longer enemies, but not quite allies. Uncertain, silent, stunned by what had just occurred. Above, the alien ship changed again. Its hull unfolded like a flower. A new figure descended, not in armor, but in robes of light and shadow. Tall, graceful, eyes like molten stars. Saul took a step forward, but hesitated, looking back at Elias. The new figure knelt beside the boy, touching his forehead gently. They spoke language not of sound, but of pulse and wave. A conversation too fast for human ears, but Elias felt it. Forgiveness. Love. Lost Dot, and then Saul turned. He ran back to Elias. Dot fell to his knees beside him and begged. No. He whispered, his voice breaking now into full human shape. No die. Please, Elias. Stay. Elias's vision blurred. He reached out, brushed a trembling hand through Saul's shimmering hair. You're safe, he whispered. That's all I wanted. Saul's eyes glowed with tears. Then he stood, and something changed. A pulse of energy flowed from him, not destructive, but healing. A warmth surged into Elias's chest. The blood stopped flowing, bones aligned. His body trembled. Seized, then relaxed, breathing returned. Shallow but alive Dot it caused Saul. His glow dimmed. His knees buckled. The figure behind him caught him gently, like a parent catching a falling star. Elias coughed, groaned, blinked in shock. You idiot, he croaked. You gave it back. Saul smiled faintly. You gave it first. The alien ship began to rise again, lifting Saul and his kin slowly into the sky. He looked down one last time, eyes locked on Elias's. So much passed between them in that gaze, more than any language could say. Gratitude, farewell, hope. The auroras flared brighter, and then they were gone. Elias lay in the snow, surrounded by armed soldiers who no longer knew why they'd come. Above him, the sky cleared, the stars burning like distant promises, and for the first time in his long, lonely life, Elias Ward believed in humanity again, because in the moment it mattered most, someone chose to see and someone chose to stand. Asterisk, the outpost stood quiet again, wrapped in the stillness of the Siberian plateau, but it was no longer the same. The storm was gone. The alien ship had vanished into the tapestry of stars. And the soldiers, once bristling with commands and guns and warnings, now lingered in awkward silence, unsure of their place in a story that had bent them all toward something none of them could explain. Elias sat inside, bundled in layers, his ribs aching with every breath. The wound was sealed miraculously, impossibly, and though the pain lingered, it pulsed with something different than injury. It pulsed with reminder. a living echo of the boy who had saved him and whom he had chosen to save. The GDC had left. Within the day, they called it a containment breach in their report. Unknown entity neutralized, the officer had said, handing Elias a paper to sign. He didn't sign it. He told them the truth, and when they frowned and threatened to blacklist him, he laughed in their faces. What were they going to take from him? His isolation? His silence? He had nothing left to lose and everything to remember. He returned to his quiet routines, but nothing felt quiet anymore. He heard Saul's laugh and the creak of the walls, saw the gleam of his skin and the frost on the windows. The books he once read aloud now sat untouched, but open, as if still waiting for a child to return and listen. He still cooked for two, still checked the sky each night, and one night, months after the world had moved on and buried the truth under layers of classified lies, Elias walked out beneath the stars again. They were there, burning cold and sharp, and above him, the auroras returned. Not the same dot, these were different. They pulsed in patterns, not random, not wild. Messages. Elias felt them. He couldn't translate them, but he understood them. He smiled. "You made it," he whispered. "You're okay." He stayed out there for hours, eyes wide to the sky, heart full of something so powerful and raw it bordered on pain. Not grief. Not regret. Longing. Because he missed Soul. Of course he did. The way a man misses something that changed him. The way the earth misses fire after the warmth is gone. But he also knew what he had done, what they had done together. He had stood when it mattered. He had chosen not to be another shadow in the crowd. He had chosen light, and that choice, small, quiet, invisible to the larger world, meant something. Weeks later, a package arrived. No return address, no stamp. Just a small black cube, humming faintly with energy. Inside it, a recording, Saul's voice, clear now, strong. "Elias, thank you. You gave me life when I had none. I will carry your name to stars beyond stars. I will tell them humans are not what they fear. That you, one man, showed more courage than all the armies of your world. I miss you, I remember." Elias played it every night, like a lullaby for his soul. He knew the world would never understand. The people who made the decisions, the ones who fired first and asked questions, never. They would write him off as a madman, a relic. The footage had been wiped. The soldiers ordered to silence. The official story buried like so many others, but Elias didn't care. He had lived the truth, and more than that, he had loved across stars. He sometimes wondered where Soul was now, what strange moons he stood on, what songs his people sang under alien skies. He imagined Soul growing older, stronger, wiser, and telling others about Earth, about kindness, about the old man in the snow who chose mercy when no one else would. Years passed, and one morning, as the sun finally broke the horizon after a long winter, a streak of silver light tore across the sky, too low, too fast, too perfect to be. Elias smiled. He didn't need a message. He knew. The boy had come home, not to stay, just to say goodbye, or maybe thank you. And in the end, that was all Elias needed, because the shape of hope is not found in monuments or medals or names carved. In stone, it is found in the simple, silent choice to do the right thing. Even when no one is watching, even when no one remembers, even when the world calls it foolish, hope is a man in the snow, arms wrapped around an alien child, whispering, "You're safe, I've got you." And sometimes that is how humanity wins, not with war, but with love.